Hi Peter, you've got a lot of animations this week. Great work. This is the second recording as the first one just crashed. So let's start all over again. We'll start with the sparks and then let's move to other animations. So, basic scenes to consider are being more careful with the lines and the contours, as there are quite a lot of scenes that we can improve in terms of being more refined and working more accurately. For example, here it's better to keep the shape more connected and pay more attention to this kind of lines to make it more visually interesting. Same goes for some of the sparks, where the lines are too thin and they become just visually too detached from the form and look like broken record in a sense. I wouldn't draw lines this thin, as it is way too small for this kind of big shapes and it distracts from the main form. Other things to consider are keeping shapes interesting. For example, this animation works quite well on this frame and on this frame, but it's a bit too repetitive on this frame because all the scenes have the same size, have the same lengths, and the same goes for the sides. I would probably keep it more connected, to be fair, and watch out for the forms. So here we have some kind of visual hierarchy, and here everything just blends and it becomes the same. Again, here a little bit too repetitive, and I would use instruments if we need to have a perfect circle or a perfectly rounded edge, as it's quite hard to keep that while drawing it with lasso or any other tool. I would use special tools for that. That way you can have more clean contours and clean, clear shapes. Again, here what catches my attention is that while it kind of explodes to the sides, the center doesn't really move, so the particles in the center remain almost at the same position, so I would probably move them as well. And the same thing here, so this area, the particles here don't actually move. Here, the problem is that this particle, it doesn't really move much when the circle explodes, and I would probably draw the circle with a tool. So erase it away. Add a circle at the bottom. This is way more clean and refined, and it just looks better. So next up, so, and then it accelerates way too much, and then here it doesn't accelerate or decelerate enough, so there's not enough deceleration between these two frames. Here it's mostly fine. I would decrease the size or the length even more between these two frames, as it doesn't really change much. Again, here's the problem is that the length doesn't change, and then it changes instantly. And then the particle stops or slows down quite a lot, stops, and then accelerates again, just a little bit. And the second problem is that here's the direction of the particles, and then this particle just for one frame faces the opposite direction. Or just a different one. Let's look at this one. This one is okay. Again, it accelerates suddenly between these three frames instead of slowing down. So there is no slowdown here. And here. Let's look at the next one. So again, being more careful with the contours, and the lines will help a lot. Also, this scene is at the bottom bothers me a bit, because first of all, it's not very interesting in terms of shape language. We can make it a little bit different and add more direction to it instead of just pointing it straight down to the side. And the second problem is that it doesn't really work with the next frame, as we'll get a particle on the right, but we don't have anything on the left, and the particle moves a bit frantically, so it accelerates the length, then it decelerates, the length is a bit smaller, and then it becomes a circle, and it slows down quite a lot, and then it accelerates again. So I would decrease the length at this frame way more, and I would make the deceleration a bit more clear. So instead of having next one. So here, again, suddenly accelerates and decelerates instantly. Here I would probably add just a little bit more to it on this frame and then make it like this. Okay. Again, no deceleration, sudden deceleration. I guess it's even acceleration at this point. Again, I would keep the shape more connected and get rid of this stuff. So there's no acceleration and deceleration in this particle. So I would probably move it more and then start decelerating it. Here it stops just a little bit too fast as it goes from this to instant stop. This one works fine. And again, stops just a little bit too fast because it doesn't really move a lot on these two frames, and then it moves much more on the next one. This one is mostly okay, it's just that this particle is suddenly disappearing and it is quite noticeable. And the second thing is the direction change. You see, it's pointing in a different direction. So let's look at the next one. So next sparks. So we have this animation and it looks quite nice. I would probably make it even faster, something like 15 frames per second. And other thing is that hole in this particle, as the particles don't have such kind of things, it's better to fill it up correctly. In terms of spacing, it looks quite good. Maybe it bothers me just a bit that this particle, it was moving in this direction, and then while it moves in the same direction, it kind of slowly rotates and faces like this. And the same for this particle. Just a little bit and then back. I would probably also add just a little bit more momentum to this particle here, as it moves quite a lot and then it stops way too fast, so I would probably add just a little bit more motion to it. And this particle, it remains on the last few frames, so I would probably remove it from this frame on. And then it will work correctly. Yeah. Yeah, and I would probably add just a little bit more motion to this particle. So it was here and then it stops in one place. So I would probably add just a little bit more motion. Next one. So this one looks quite good. It's a great study material. I would probably change the resolution of the project and work at a larger resolution and be more careful with contours and lines, as it's quite rough. The second thing is that these particles have a very similar form and motion, and the problem is that they disappear at the same time as well. So to make it more interesting, I would probably change the size a bit and the position, and I would keep one particle 4 or 5 frames, maybe 3-4 frames longer than the other one, to not make it too similar. Okay, next up we have these sparks. Again, being more refined would help. I bet we can even keep some kind of overall shape on the first 1 or 2 frames, something like that, or something else, as they kind of start as sparks and there is no source of sparks per se. I like the nice circular motion. I would probably kill this particle earlier, as every particle moves quite a lot from the center, and this particle remains way too long in the center, and there are no other particles to create an interesting composition or an interesting contrast in the center. And it's kinda lonely there. The spacing is quite nice overall, so good job. So, next up is our explosion. So, explosions are quite tricky. This one looks nice, but we can improve some places and some parts. First of all, I would make it more punchy and more rhythmic by making the first frame smaller, as we don't have much contrast in terms of motion. So we start like this, and then we're like this, and then we're like this, and you see the spacing here is very similar. So we don't have a nice contrast in terms of spacing at the beginning. To change that, we can simply make this smaller, make this smaller, and it repeats again, yeah. So we can make it smaller, and keep the shape connected here. We can add some brighter bits in the center. We can change up the color to make it more interesting and to indicate that the shapes are brimming with energy at the start of the animation. And you can experiment with colors to make it more interesting. So it depends. This way it's a little bit more energetic. Okay, so in terms of spacing, it's okay, but we can make it even better in some parts. So here we start like this. We decelerate, and then we don't decelerate, and then we don't decelerate, and then we suddenly decelerate here. Then we decelerate here, and as we completely decelerated as the previous frame, we start accelerating here again, and decelerate instantly again. And we don't have a clear, nice deceleration, so we don't have a nice deceleration. We have deceleration, acceleration, deceleration, acceleration, deceleration. That's the same here. Accelerates a bit, decelerates a bit, decelerates a bit, decelerates, it decelerates instantly. So it's better to work on that a little bit more. Here it decelerates quite a lot, but then it suddenly accelerates again, and decelerates again, and accelerates here, and again here. So it moves like this, it accelerates, to be fair. Yeah, it accelerates here almost, and then suddenly stops and goes to the side, which looks quite strange as we've lost all the momentum going in this direction, and we didn't have a slowdown, that's why it looks even more strange. Here it does accelerate a lot, and then it suddenly accelerates quite a lot. And then it stops almost instantly, and we don't have a lot of acceleration there. Oh, deceleration. Here this particle kind of appears out of nowhere, so it looks rough. And especially here, because the edge was moving and lagging behind, and then it suddenly disappears. Here the shape changes just a little bit too much. You see, it was going like this, then it accelerated in this direction, decelerated here, and then it changes, it accelerates here, decelerates there, and decelerates completely over every other part. So that's why it's a little bit rough in terms of spacing. You can also experiment more with the shapes, as in the end it's a little bit too repetitive, but still nice. In terms of which part is the most important to fix, I guess this scene and this particle, they grab all your attention because they're quite big, and their spacing and their timing are way different from the rest of the explosion, so that grabs all of your attention, and that's not a good scene. The sparks also lack a little bit of this kind of difference in spacing by changing the spacing on the first two frames, or just by scaling down this, it can get better. So, got 2 animations left. It's quite a nice one. Some of the issues with animation are I would probably keep this form connected or experiment with it a little bit more and make it more refined, as it looks very rough in animation. I don't know, and keep it like this, for example, and add a small star thing at the center or something like that, or just keep the white shape connected to the yellow shape and make it smaller, and that will work. Second problem is that it kind of faces the wrong direction here, so I would fix that, and here it's okay, but then it kind of falls in the opposite direction, so it goes like this, so it goes like this, and then it goes like that. So it was rotating counterclockwise, and then it breaks that rotation. And again, it was pointing in that direction and then points in this direction. And it rotates way too much between these two frames, so it feels like this part becomes this part, while this part stays almost the same. This part rotates to this part, so I would keep this rotation smaller and just rotate it just a little bit. So if it was like this, I would rotate it like that probably. Maybe adding a few streaks here and there. So it's this kind of angle. The second thing is the spacing of the smoke. So it goes like this, then goes like that, and then it decelerates suddenly, especially here, and then it accelerates and changes the shape completely. So it was quite more detailed shape here, and then it decelerates and becomes more simplified shape, and then it becomes even more simplified shape, and it accelerates again and decelerates again. Decelerates almost completely and accelerates in a different direction. And here it's pointing in that direction, then it accelerates in this direction, then it accelerates in that direction, then it accelerates in this direction, and in this direction. But then it breaks apart in this direction and starts slowing down. But it's not a very clean slowdown. Slows down, accelerates a bit, slows down. And here accelerates, slows down, accelerates, slows down, accelerates, slows down. So there are way too many changes in spacing here, way too many accelerations. There are 3 accelerations, I guess, or something like that. Slows down, doesn't slow down, and then accelerates here. Slows down, accelerates a bit, slows down. Decelerates, 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 accelerates here, decelerates. So just pay just a little bit more attention to the spacing in some places, and maybe you can experiment more with the shapes, as the shapes are a bit too repetitive, especially at the end. You can also look at the spacing of the holes. Yeah, here I would probably add the particle, as this part disappears way too fast. And here it's only disappears way too fast too, and stops. And accelerates a bit again. This particle is a little bit boring in terms of design, as it's basically a rectangle, so I would curve it more. So let's look at the next one. So here the problem is in the beginning, as we have a 90-degree angle between the source of the smoke and the smoke direction in the second half of the animation. So usually you get the smoke starting, then it accelerates and the forms are more rough and pointy, and then it becomes more wave-like and goes up and slows down, all that stuff. But here it kind of changes its direction mid-air, and that's very strange scene for the smoke. The forms are a bit more like balloons in the first half of the animation, so they don't convey how the smoke moves and looks all that much, and the spacing is a little bit too repetitive, so there's no acceleration and slowdown. The shapes just increase in size. So if we go from this part, from this frame, and add some kind of start, masses become bigger, and then, for example, this mass becomes something like that. So we can start with 3-4 frames like that, and then go on to this frame, and that way it will work. For now it doesn't really work like smoke at all. So the spacing is a bit rough in some places, it accelerates, it decelerated here, it accelerates, it decelerates instantly. 1, 2, 3, 4, accelerated a bit, stops. So if we'll fix that, the sound will be more logical. And you can fix the first part by decreasing the amount of frames and changing up the shapes, something like this, or maybe something that better conveys the direction and the source of the smoke, but it will still look a bit strange because of the 90-degree angle change of direction. Hope that helps and wish you good luck with your animations. Bye!